I mean, we were facing, food shortages long before the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah.
But Russia and Ukraine combined produce, I think, at something like 30 or 40% of the world's grain. It's a ridiculous amount. They're the top 2 grain producers in the world, followed by like Canada, the U.S., and I believe Brazil. They produce tons of it, and Ukraine's farm fields are, I mean, as far as you can tell from like the news, they're probably pretty much worthless, like just on fire.
Yep.
The Russians are basically like salting the earth as they go through it.
Okay, everybody, welcome to the Angel Research Podcast. We are here as usual today to discuss the market's hottest stock stories and investment opportunities. We've got Jason Williams on the show today. Jason is an ex-Wall Street guy who has reformed his way into the newsletter space, and he now spends his days keeping Main Street investors informed about what's going on in the market. Jason does this through a couple of investment advisory services, including the Wealth Advisory, Main Street Ventures, and more recently launched Future Giants. And today, Jason's going to talk to us about a couple of his favorite stock picks, specifically surrounding a couple of key global shortages that we're going to get into in a minute. Per our usual disclaimer, nothing that we say here today is personal financial advice. We can give you tools and insights to make good trading decisions, but we cannot make those decisions for you. Also, please like, comment, and subscribe. The engagement really helps us out. Jason, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to have you back on. The last time that you were on here, we kind of talked a little bit about a couple of macro issues. I had you make some predictions about a pending recession and inflation. And you told us at the time that we were not finished with inflation yet.
I did.
That inflation is not going away, and giving this week's CPI read, it seems that you were kind of onto something here. So before we get into the shortages, I just wanted to see if you had any kind of updated thoughts on that CPI read. Do you think we're out of the woods yet? Do you think that maybe a peak is coming sooner, or are you still kind of equally pessimistic as you were last time?
Well, I'm still sort of pessimistic, and I'll tell you, I don't like the talk of a peak because, we may have already been past the peak. We may have seen peak inflation at 8.7, 9.1%, but that doesn't mean that it's going to just come right back down.
Maybe more of a plateau?
Yeah, and that's sort of more what I see. We saw inflation coming down, slightly in July and August, but it was energy prices. And energy prices are volatile. They're always volatile. But we haven't really seen, and I feel like I said this last time, we haven't really seen the sticky inflation hit there, and that's wage growth and the cost of housing.
Sure.
We're already seeing mortgages are more expensive because of higher interest rates.
Yeah.
But rent has just been flying. I'm looking at buying a new house, and I don't want to sell my townhouse in Baltimore. I want to rent it out. So I've been looking hey, how much can I rent this house out for? I figure, a couple $1,000s. No, houses like that are renting out for way more than I expected. You're talking about $3,000, $3,500 for a house that 5 years ago you could have bought for $2,000, you could have rented for $2,100. So those are the things that are sticky. When rent goes up, usually your landlord doesn't call and say, "Hey, we're lowering the rent."
And rent is a pretty significant portion. Rent and housing, I guess, in general, is a pretty significant portion of the CPI. It's weighted pretty heavily, I guess I should say, right?
Yeah, it is, and we really haven't seen that really coming into effect, and that's the kind of stuff that sticks around longer. Sure, the oil prices come down, but hey, oil prices are probably going to go back up because they've been coming down because we've been sort of manipulating them. We're releasing however many million barrels a day from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. It's getting empty.
What do you think of the whole proposals from the White House that we're seeing about kind of capping prices on gas? Do you ever see that passing? Do you think that is feasible? Do you think that would help or hurt?
Oh man, I'd never like to hear about price controls.
Yep.
I think they're a horrible idea. Whether that means that they won't pass or not, I can't say.
Sure.
I mean, I could definitely see them passing. A lot of terrible ideas come out of Washington. D.C. and the state. I mean, let's be honest, and nothing bad against, the people in D.C. or in Washington state, but just, bad ideas come from everywhere. And a lot of times they catch on and they take hold. I mean, look at Europe. Europe had the bad idea of getting themselves either beholden to Russia or, having to rely on a technology that's just not quite there yet in renewable energy. And now they're facing this crisis where, basically they're sort of SOL. They can either buy their energy from Russia or they can buy their energy from Russia through China and pretend that they're not buying it from Russia.
Yeah.
They can get some of it from us, but I mean, only so much of it because we can only export so much. We don't have pipelines that go to Europe. We've got ships that go there, but ships shipping is expensive, and there's only a certain number of liquefaction places because we have to liquefy our natural gas to put it into the tanks to get it over to Europe. And there's only certain numbers of de-liquefaction places there because unlike this now, I always thought like to de-liquefy it, you just sort of like let it out of the tank. It's like propane, like the propane in my tank in my grill is a liquid when it's in the tank, but once I open it up, it comes out the regulator and it becomes gas, because it's not under pressure anymore. But that's not how it works with the natural gas. They actually have to go through a process to de-liquefy it. And there's only so many of those, and they take a long time to build. So, I mean, they're
looking at a tough winter,
yeah,
right?
They're looking at a tough winter. And this is a big word salad for me to say that, yes, I think that a dumb idea like price controls could pass here in the U.S. I really hope that it doesn't. It doesn't end up helping anybody. It ends up I studied economics in college, and there's something that they talk about called deadweight loss. And tariffs lead to deadweight loss. Taxes lead to deadweight loss. Price controls lead to deadweight loss. And that's basically just money that is just taken out of the economy, never to be back into it again.
Sure. It's just basic inefficiencies.
Exactly.
That makes sense. Okay, so let's move on to a related topic, which is kind of this food shortage that we're seeing.
Speaking of bad ideas.
I pulled a quote from TFI Global, speaking of Europe. It says, Europe is staring at a food shortage so intense that hunger will be the chief cause of death. Pulling a further quote from there, they say, according to data from the Industry Association Fertilizers Europe, Russia and Belarus provide 60% of the EU's fertilizer, and sanctions introduced earlier this year on imports of potash have put significant pressure on fertilizer supplies. Quote from Bloomberg says that Europe's corn crop will plummet by 20%. So obviously that is related somewhat to the energy crisis as well. But
100%.
I was hoping you could kind of maybe expand a little bit. Tell us maybe kind of, how bad is the shortage really and what is causing it? Obviously the energy has feed-down effects, but there are some other things going on as well.
Okay. So I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but prior to COVID-19, there were already, hundreds of millions of people in the world who were sort of facing food insecurity, right? They weren't on the brink of starvation, but, a couple of days without shipments, and they would be. COVID-19 really just screwed up the entire global supply chain. Everybody knows that. It also screwed up global farming. Because the supply chain was so messed up, farmers weren't able to get their crops to market. So farmers were culling their herds. They were literally killing off animals because they couldn't sell them for protein. For our protein. They were plowing in their fields because they couldn't harvest it and take it to the market because nobody was coming to pick it up. Nobody was there to buy it.
Yeah.
So that really that sort of set into motion, a little long-term thing where it's
kind
going
of
to be
a cascading effect.
a cascading effect where they're going to have to recover from that. But then you brought up the fact that this is all sort of related to the energy issues, and it's also related to the climate change arguments.
Yep.
And so, basically, the climate change argument hinges on, climate change is caused by carbon emissions, right? So we need to get rid of all carbon emissions. We need to stop using fossil fuels. Well, the majority of nitrogen-based fertilizers are created by burning natural gas. So that releases carbon emissions, and so you've got EU countries coming in and basically telling farmers, you have to cut down on your carbon emissions, and you have to cut down on the carbon emissions that are produced by the fertilizer that you use. And the only way they can do that is by not using fertilizer, right? And about 50% of the world relies on food that's grown with fertilizer. So basically, if we stop using fertilizer, 50% of the world starves to death, period.
Sure.
Hard stop. That's it. Fertilizer is what's keeping the global population alive, and it's not just in Europe. In Canada, they've done the same thing with their farmers. They're telling their farmers they need to reduce their carbon emission outputs from fertilizers, and it's really. I mean, it's a terrible. This goes back to these terrible ideas that come out, and it's a terrible idea at an even worse time because we were already facing food insecurity, and now we've got governments that are coming in and basically being like, "Well, you can't grow food."
Yeah, what's that? Is the quote that says something like "the road to hell is paved with good intentions" or something like that?
Definitely.
Is that how that quote goes?
I think so. I mean, we may be misquoting it, but yeah, it's something like that. To paraphrase, the road to hell is definitely lined with good intentions.
So you kind of alluded to this earlier, but this kind of this food shortage doesn't just affect crops; it trickles down to livestock if you can't grow these crops.
Oh, definitely.
Obviously livestock relies
also,
on these crops.
We've got we've been, whether it's true or not, we've been convinced that protein farms are a big cause of carbon emissions.
Yep.
That the methane from now I feel like most people are getting the wrong impression that it's the methane from when the cows fart. No, it's not the methane from some of that, yes.
Sure.
But it's that when manure breaks down, usually at a protein farm, the in the barns, the animals are going to the bathroom and it drops down into slats and then it gets washed out into a lagoon. And basically it just sits there and microbes, do their natural thing and break it down and turn it into, to compost and soil and but while they're doing that, they're releasing greenhouse gases. They're releasing methane, they're releasing CO2, they're releasing all of this stuff. So the longer that manure sits out there, and getting broken down through aerobic respiration, the more carbon emissions are coming out.
Sure.
So you've also got, and then
is there specific legislation that is causing additional issues here, or is this just that kind of proposed legislation? And
in the U.S., it's still, to my knowledge, all proposed legislation. But you also have issues where we've been having heat waves, and we've actually had a lot of cattle have been sold very early in the year this year in the U.S. because the farmers are either they're running into a couple of problems. Either it's too hot for the cows, so they're like, oh shoot, I don't want them to die in the field because it's so hot. Let's get them to market so I can make some money off of them. Or it's, hey, I can't get food for the cows,
so one of the things I was reading was that they were basically moving livestock onto hay or way earlier than they need to, or that they typically do because of basically the status of the corn crops.
Well, yeah, I mean grain. Everybody eats grain. All the animals eat grain. We all eat grain. Grain's what bread's made of, and This one's interesting because Russia and we were facing food shortages long before the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah.
But Russia and Ukraine combined produce at something like 30 or 40% of the world's grain. It's a ridiculous amount. They're the top two grain producers in the world, followed by Canada, the U.S., and I believe Brazil. They produce tons of it, and Ukraine's farm fields are, as far as you can tell from the news, they're probably pretty much worthless, just on fire.
Yep.
The Russians are basically salting the earth as they go through.
Are there any regions that are kind of picking up the slack, or is it basically just the supply is going to be low for a while until these areas can recover?
Well, and that's the issue, is that the supply is going to be low for a while because the regions that could sort of help pick up the slack are places like Canada and the U.S. and the rest of Europe, and in the rest of Europe and in Canada, they're already sort of cutting down on what farmers can and can't do and how much food they'll be able to grow with the fertilizer that they're allowed to use. And so, like I said, we haven't gotten to that point here in the U.S., but U.S. crops have had a rough year anyway. It's been dry in some places. It's been too wet in other places.
So you mentioned you were trading futures earlier. Do you expect that meat prices are gonna increase?
Oh, definitely. And I think that they'll keep going up. And I think that this is the thing, is I think that eventually real meat is going to become, and when I say real meat, I mean meat from an animal. Is going to.
So
I was
going to ask you about how you feel about kind of this whole alternative protein production industry and where everything is going there.
I'll say I still prefer my meat to come from an animal.
Sure.
But I understand that eventually it's going to be so expensive, that not everybody's a regular steak is going to cost as much as a Kobe steak. Yeah. The steak that we usually get for $5.90, or I guess it's $10.99 a pound in the grocery store now, is going to go for those Kobe $399 a pound prices.
Sure. Well, yeah, you're talking about actual well, I guess there's also the reverse argument that the Kobe is going to get cheaper if they can create this kind of cultured meat right? And if
Potentially.
you're going to culture meat, why would you? You're not going to like culture a chuck steak. You're going to culture like
Culture the best.
You're
Culture
gonna
the
you're gonna
finest.
do the best.
Culture the luxury meats. But yeah, I definitely can see real like animal protein becoming a luxury food item in the future, and I think that's that because of that, it's vital that we have other sources of protein for the rest of us because the human body needs protein. Protein is the fuel for our brains. It's the reason that that we're at the top of the food chain. We don't have any natural weapons. We don't have a prehensile tail. I mean, like we've got opposable thumbs, but like those aren't really that great. We don't have fangs. We don't have claws. We're not super fast. We can't hear well. We don't see well. Our sense of smell isn't that great. But we eat a lot of protein and we have huge brains. And that is what, has given us our place in the world. So we've got to have that source of protein.
So I would assume with, the price of, real animal meat going up and that kind of protein consumption is getting expensive is basically going to create some sort of opportunity for alternative meat production or alternative protein production, I should say. Do you see any investment opportunities in this arena?
100%. And I actually have a company that I'm really focused on for that. And the reason that I'm focused on it is because, alternative meats, alternative protein sources, fake meat, however you want to call it. It's not new.
I think fake meat is just sounds so unappetizing.
I know, it really does.
I think it's funny. I don't mean to interrupt, but I just think it's so funny that I feel like they're trying to come up with all of these terms for this that are going to sound appetizing, and it's just stop calling it meat. Stop trying to say that it's fake meat or this meat or that meat or clean meat, whatever they're calling it. Just call it what it is. It's I don't know. Pea protein or
vegetable protein,
Sure.
I mean, but that's the thing is that and I think that the reason that they're trying to come up with all these different names is because fake meat is not new. And I'm just going to go ahead and call it fake meat. I'm going to call it what it is, fake meat. It's not new. We've had Morningstar Farms and Boca Burgers and stuff.
Beyond.
And the reason that fake meat sounds unappetizing is because that stuff was not appetizing. That stuff was disgusting.
Yeah.
I was at a vegan, this is like a funny story. So I was at a vegan deli. It's a deli on the corner of Haight and Ashbury in San Francisco. I was visiting a friend, and he was like, "Oh, I really want to try out this deli. It's called Love and Hate, and it's right by Haight Park and Haight Ashbury and stuff. And I hear it's really good." And we get there, and you think deli. I'm from Baltimore. I'm thinking a Jewish deli.
Sure.
I'm thinking Lenny's Delicatessen.
Atman's.
I'm gonna go or Atman's or something. I'm gonna go get a sandwich with some big thick cuts of
meat. It was all
on
vegan
it.
stuff.
All vegan stuff. And we're sitting there eating it, and we're like, you know what, man? This is actually pretty good. And he looks over at me, and he's like, dude, can you imagine if you were eating a real meat sandwich that tasted like this? Would you say it tasted pretty good? And I was like, no, I'd say it tasted like a piece of cardboard.
Sure.
And he was like, that's crazy, But that's the thing is that, the old stuff wasn't appetizing. And that's why I'm really focused on this one company, because basically what they've been doing over the past couple of years is they've been bringing together all sorts of different people and different companies under one hood. And so now they've got a company that produces what's called pulses. And so pulses are legumes basically. It's the ground up it's like the powder that you get, the flour that you would get from grinding up legumes peas or peanuts. And it's very high in protein, right? So that's what companies like Beyond Meat use to make their meat.
Okay, so this company is a supplier, or is that?
It is a supplier. It's not a supplier of Beyond Meat, but it's a supplier of other companies that make their own artificial meats.
Sure.
Fake meats. But what it's also done is it's gone out and it's brought people in who have worked in the food technology industry, which sounds really weird, food technology, but something like Cheetos. Cheetos has hundreds of patents.
Yeah.
On how you get it to be puffed like that, how you get the flavor in the into the powdered cheese, how you get the powdered cheese to stay on it. There's patents for all of this stuff.
Yeah, I watched a documentary one time or an interview or something with the guy that's basically he was the head of food technology or whatever for Taco Bell, and he was kind of explaining how they engineer the food.
Yeah, those Doritos Locos Tacos
to make it so that even when you're full, they're trying to trick you and to make you feel like you're hungry.
Oh, definitely. The Lay's potato chips, you can't eat just one. That's because Lay's has stuff in their potato chips that sort of helps clear the flavor of the potato chip out of your mouth, so you want another one.
Yeah.
So that it feels if you want to eat another one. So basically what this company has also gone out and done that. And so that's what's really been holding back the other imitation meat companies, the other fake meat companies, is that they're like, okay, this has all of the qualities of meat, except the flavor, except the texture, except like, what people want.
And they're combining it all
the
together.
taste and the mouthfeel and stuff. And so basically they're going out and they've combined all of these companies together. So they've got the company that creates the pulses to the main ingredient, right? And then they've got the company that has the technology to take those pulses and say make like a Cheeto that's made out of plant protein instead of made out of corn flour.
Yeah.
And they've got the technology to make the flavors taste better and give you the mouthfeel that people want, so that your chicken nugget tastes like a chicken nugget, so that your hamburger tastes and feels like a hamburger when you're chewing it, so that your Cheeto tastes like a Cheeto even though it's healthy and good for you. So that's what I really like about them, is I feel like, and I feel like you really hit it on the head, where you're like, oh man, I hate calling it fake meat because that sounds so unappetizing. And it sounds unappetizing because fake meat always has been. You've been sacrificing. You're like, I'm going to make a sacrifice to not eat animals, or I'm going to make a sacrifice, for the benefit of the planet. But, it's not going to catch on if everybody has to make a sacrifice. People don't like making sacrifices, and so it's got to be like, I'm going to eat this because it tastes just as good as the other thing, or I'm going to eat this because it's even better than the other thing.
Is this company are they doing any kind of like cultured meat where they're trying to like grow the cells, or they're purely looking at the
one
plant?
That I'm following is purely plant protein.
Yeah, which I think in terms of like the near term investments, I think that is the way to go. I know that there are a lot of people who are kind of eyeing the cultured meat, but
definitely.
I think
I'm paying attention to that space too. But
eventually,
I think in the head, in the consumer's mind, it's going to be easier to get over that this is plant-based meat as opposed to like this was grown in a petri dish in a lab.
I think it's a matter of like actual scale too, and the economics is
definitely, definitely
being able to like mass produce this stuff that I just don't think we're there technologically.
Yeah, no, definitely, because I mean, the technology that you need to produce plant-based meats or plant-based proteins or whatever, it's already there.
Yeah.
With the technology and to do it at scale, it's already there. We've seen that with Beyond Meat, we've seen that with Morningstar Farms. I think that's owned by Tyson.
Yeah.
So like, the technology to do that is there. It's just that nobody ever took it that next step to make it like to make it taste good, to make it desirable.
Okay, and if I wanted access to your coverage on this stock, where would I go? Which are your
Future Giants.
Okay.
So we're covering that one in Future Giants. I would love to give the name of it out, but I just can't because people have paid money to get that.
We'll put a link in the description for anyone who wants to check it out.
I'm calling it the next Nestle because I really think that it has the ability to become as big as a company like Nestle.
Yeah.
And it's also already a supplier to Nestle. So it's really like it supplies a lot of these big companies, and it's got a lot of products on the shelves at places like Walmart and Costco and H-E-B stores.
Yeah.
And it's just that the products don't go by the company's name. So, a lot of people out there, listening to this may have actually used some of the products, or at least have seen their products, but have no idea that they're this company's products.
Gotcha. Yeah. So they're like kind of like hidden beneath the surface.
Yeah, totally stealth, like under the radar. And I love that. I love that about a company. But when that comes out, they're going to be big. And I call them the next Nestle because Nestle got its start as baby food. They made powdered baby food, and like powdered baby formula.
Are they going to be as evil as Nestle?
I don't know, maybe. I mean, all companies, when they get big, become evil, I think, But no, Nestle got their start doing that. So they made a powdered baby formula, right? And there was a guy that was trying to develop milk chocolate, right? And he was like, I need to figure out how to get milk to be in a powdered form. Hey, dude, you already figured out how to make baby formula be powdered. Like, can I get your technology?
So they just
Let's merge
licensed
our
it out?
companies. So no, they basically merged their companies, and that created Nestle. And so Nestle made baby formula and milk chocolate, and that was it. And then World War I broke out, and there was a shortage of dairy products. And the dairy products that were available, they spoiled because like refrigeration wasn't that great, back during the 19-teens and 1920s and stuff. Like refrigeration just wasn't quite there yet. So they needed a way to get dairy products to the front without them spoiling. And Nestle was like, hey, we got this powdered milk. It never goes bad. How about that? And boom. Nestle becomes, a multi-million-dollar company, and now is, a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah,
That's pretty
it's
wild.
crazy. A lot of companies actually get their start doing, basically solving a crisis. And the biggest companies, some of the biggest companies, got that way because they literally stepped up and solved a crisis. DuPont, they made black powder and stuff like that, but they also figured out how to make chemical detergents. Because it was, we used to make all of our detergents out of natural products, out of like animal fat and stuff. And that was running low during World War I.
And that's kind of the concept behind this whole idea of future giants, is you're looking for companies that are kind of in the early stages of kind of treating some sort of major crisis. And then,
either addressing a major crisis or, addressing an industry that's going to be like a big growth industry in the future. We've got investments in small copper miners. We've got investments in small lithium companies, small oil companies. So we're not just focused on, like the renewable energy thing. We also realize that oil is going to be around for a long time. So
speaking of renewable energy, I actually kind of want to switch topics here for a second, just keep the conversation moving to global energy storage.
Okay.
Elon Musk is out there tweeting as usual this week.
Oh, gosh, he loves to tweet.
He had some harsh words about fusion power. And he was kind of reaffirming his belief that solar and wind are going to be the primary sources of energy. And he also kind of discussed the importance of energy storage. And I think that makes sense for him to do because he is selling energy storage solutions.
That's right.
But he is selling lithium storage. And there are a lot of people out there that say that lithium storage is not going to cut it for all of our global energy storage needs. Mm-hmm. For various reasons that I guess we could kind of get into. It's not necessarily great for the environment. There's only so much lithium. Batteries degrade over time. You can inform us a little bit more.
You need a huge battery. Like you think about like the majority of the weight of a Tesla is its battery, and that's just to power the car for a few hundred miles. Like you want to power a whole town.
Exactly.
You need like a couple of football fields of free space.
Sure. So what? I guess my question to you is, what is your opinion on lithium's role in grid energy storage, not necessarily vehicles?
Okay.
I know that you've been a proponent of alternative energy storage solutions, so maybe you could tell us a little bit about lithium and then what potential alternatives that there may be in the market.
Okay. So I think lithium is a great solution for energy storage on a small scale. For vehicles, for like individual houses, I think it's great. It is better than a lead acid battery for sure. The best battery technology that we've developed so far. But like you said, it's dangerous. Lithium itself, like lithium ion, as soon as it comes into contact with air, explodes. It combusts immediately. So basically the solution to that is making the sides of the battery as thick as possible. But I mean, if you drop the battery, like if you get into a car accident, I don't know exactly how strong they are. Maybe if you kick it too hard, maybe if you're moving something around your house and you bump the battery, maybe, at a large scale place, you're moving some stuff around with a forklift and you puncture one of those batteries with the forklift. I know that Tesla, Elon Musk, you mentioned that he sells these large grid level, lithium batteries, and they've had explosions at every single one of those things that he's put together.
Do you know if that aspect of Tesla's business is substantial at all, or is that kind of one of those things where he's just like floating this idea that he's going to put solar panels on roofs?
Yeah, that's sort of like one of the things that's out there, like the Tesla solar panels, or the solar shingles, things like that. The Boring Company, do we have any tunnels yet? I haven't seen any. Not that I know of, the Hyperloop, just all these ideas. He's an idea man. He's not necessarily an execution man, though.
But he's a hype man, is what he is. He really is a hype man.
For sure, he definitely is. He's like, what's that movie, Old School? He's like the guy in the green suit, that comes out with Snoop Dogg.
No, I know what you're talking about.
He's the hype man.
I haven't seen that movie in ages.
I know. I'm surprised I remembered.
So what kind of alternatives do we have to lithium if that's not going to cut it?
So right now, the largest the largest form of energy storage in the world is hydropower. Mm-hmm. It's hydroelectric power, and basically like that involves either damming up a river or filling up tanks with water or some other liquid, and then letting gravity drop it down. But the issue with that, we're seeing that in Europe right now. We're seeing that in China too. China relies a lot on hydropower, and when there's a drought, you don't have enough water.
Sure.
So Europe's running into that problem where like they've got a drought, they don't have enough water for their hydropower, they don't even have enough water to float boats down their rivers to bring in coal. Yes, the water's a great idea, it's a great solution, but there are places where you don't have enough of it.
Sure.
And we're seeing that even in places where you normally have enough of it, sometimes it runs out and you can't use it. So Europe's not able to generate hydropower or enough hydropower right now to make up for what they need. And you go to like Saudi Arabia.
I was going to say I would take anywhere in the desert.
Yeah.
Probably you can't really do hydropower. It doesn't make sense.
I mean, if you have water, like why are you going to waste it like just by holding it in a reservoir?
Sure.
You're going to use that to grow crops. You're going to use that to feed, to give people water. So you've got deserts, places where the temperature is below freezing, where you can't have liquid water. You have solid water, but solid water doesn't move very well.
Yeah.
So you need some other energy solution, and there are companies out there that are working on lots of different things. And one of the ones that I've uncovered that we've got that we've invested in Future Giants is basically doing something similar to hydro storage, to hydroelectric storage, where basically it's the same concept. You're using gravity. Gravity is available everywhere in the world. Everywhere on the planet, there's the same amount of gravity. No country can have a monopoly on it. China has practically a monopoly on like cobalt mining and on lithium mining and like all of these different minerals, but they can't have a monopoly on gravity. So this company basically has figured out a way to sort of create a hydroelectric dam without any water, without any liquid.
Okay, how do they do that?
How do they do it?
Yeah.
So basically, it's so simple that it's amazing that somebody else hadn't done it first.
Sure.
But basically, with hydroelectric power, what we're all really familiar with is seeing dams. But another way to do that is what's called pumped hydro, where basically you have a reservoir here and a reservoir higher up here. And you take water from this reservoir and you use electricity and a pump and you pump it up to this reservoir. And then basically what you've done is you have stored the electricity that it took to pump that water up there.
So you took kinetic energy, you turned it into potential energy,
exactly.
and now you're having it kind of sit there. And now you
just got this potential energy sitting up there, right?
So it's interesting because basically it's almost like that body of water is a battery.
Yeah.
In a way.
And that's exactly what it is. That body of water is a battery. And so that's the big difference between renewable energy or alternative energy and hydrocarbons like oil and coal and natural gas. Oil and coal and natural gas are batteries. They are stored energy.
Yep.
You don't have to do anything. Like literally they're energy in stored form. But wind turbines and solar panels, the energy that they produce has to be used immediately, or it has to be stored in something else.
Gotcha.
Because it's not stored energy; it's created energy.
Yeah.
And so using say like a solar panel, you don't need the energy right now because the sun's out. You don't need to turn your lights on. But when the sun goes away, you're going to want to turn your lights on. So you use the energy from the solar panel to raise up that water, or in this company's case, weights. They figured, hey, like water works because it's heavy and it's affected by gravity. There's lots of other things out there that are heavy and affected by gravity. What about concrete? So we get concrete out there. And basically this company uses the electricity that it doesn't need right now to go ahead and lift up these heavy weights. And then when you need the electricity, the weights get lowered back down, and they
so
sort
like
of
on
run
some
through.
sort of tower or what?
Yeah, it's almost like a big crane. Well, their original prototype sort of looks like a big crane.
Okay.
But obviously there are problems with that. A crane is exposed on all sides to wind. So if you're in a windy place where most wind turbines would be located, then you're going to have wind blowing on your crane, and it's going to make it really tough to operate.
Gotcha.
So they've got a new, their second. I don't know.
Prototype concept.
Yeah, we'll say concept because I think it's really past the prototype stage here. Is basically an enclosed building, where these weights are lifted and lowered, and it's like I said, it's just so simple that it sounds almost dumb, but
well, it's pretty crazy to think about because lithium and all these other I see a lot of kind of like news about this new breakthrough battery, but they always require some sort of resource that is difficult to come by.
Yeah, it's always a resource that's
this
hard to
I'm
come
assuming
by.
is just concrete and steel.
Concrete, steel, and that's pretty much it. And honestly, if you don't have concrete, you can use pretty much anything. We mentioned the desert. You could use big bags of sand. There's lots of that in the desert. So you don't have to. You could use. This is great. So wind turbines have a useful life, and they're not entirely recyclable when they stop working. But what you can do is you can compact them down into a block, and you can use that old wind turbine that you can't recycle, that would just have to like go off to a landfill and leach toxins out into the soil. You can use that as a weight.
Okay, gotcha.
You could use anything heavy as a weight. All of these electric vehicles. If people stop driving electric vehicles, we could just hang electric vehicles up and use them. They're heavy.
I would assume that maybe one of the only disadvantages then, or at least one disadvantage that I can think of, is that you're losing some energy to friction, or
You do. You definitely do. But it's the same with lithium batteries. You lose some energy when you're charging them. You're not actually. It's not 100% in, 100% out. It's
Gotcha.
100% in, like 75% out. And hydropower is about 75% also. And these batteries that this company has developed are between 70 and 80% efficient.
Okay, gotcha. So they're
right
basically
up
they're
there with
already on the same
hydropower,
level,
right up on the same level as lithium.
but they don't have the disadvantage of being restrained or constrained by geography.
Yep, by geography, by resources, by trade blocks. I mean, look, the world seems to be splitting up right now.
Sure.
We're not quite as globalized as we were. And you've got China and Russia are sort of like forming their own little block over there, and then the West and the U.S. Have their own block over here. And China and Russia, especially China, they really have tight control over a lot of resources, and a lot of the resources that we need for these alternative for the alternative energy storage.
So I would assume that maybe this company would team up with solar or wind companies to
It definitely will.
Is there anything in the works? Or?
So it's when we first invested in it, it had one site that was operational. It was hooked up to the Swiss power grid, and it was already helping provide energy for the Swiss. They are in talks and have contracts with the Saudi royal family because they're building a gigantic. It's going to be the biggest solar farm in the world, and they want to use this company's energy storage method to store the energy from that solar farm. And their goal is for this solar farm and this energy storage center to be able to power 4.5 million homes in Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
Just amazing, really huge.
And would they just be right next to each other, or how does that?
Basically, yeah. You've got solar field right here, and the building with the energy storage right next to it, so that it doesn't have to travel very far, just right up, and then when you need the electricity, it runs right back out. Now that one's not completed yet. That's not functional yet, but that is planned. But they have recently signed deals and started projects here in the U.S. too to help with Texas's power grid and with Southern California power grid. And so I think they're deploying about 200 to 500 megawatts worth of energy storage in Texas and California to help store energy from their power.
So they're
plants.
all over the globe.
They really are,
Okay.
and they're popping up. Every couple of weeks, I get a new alert saying that they've signed a new deal, that they're partnering with another company in another state or another country to store energy for them. So it's really cool because it was sort of. They were when we first invested in them in Future Giants. This is another Future Giant.
I was just about to ask.
They were still very developmental stage. They were still very early stage. They had the crane that was hooked up to the Swiss power grid, but that was it. And that's like investing in Tesla when it just had a Roadster. And not many people wanted to do that, but hey, it worked out really well for them.
Sure, a bit riskier earlier on, but if you want to make a ton of money in the stock market, that's probably the way to do it.
That's definitely the way to do it, and really what we're seeing is we're seeing the proof of the concept.
Yep.
The company is proving that its concept worked. It's proving that its technology is superior to some of the technology out there, and at least as good as the other technology out there. It works in places where the stuff that's as efficient as it won't work. It works in places where hydroelectric won't work. It's just as efficient, and in some cases more efficient than lithium storage.
Gotcha.
It's way safer. It's way cheaper. It's not going to randomly explode. It's not like hydrogen, which can also randomly explode. So no fuel cells. It's just a lot safer. And people want safe things. You mentioned Elon Musk saying that he doesn't really have good things to say about fusion technology. And fusion technology is that's harnessing the power of the sun.
Yeah, that's infinite energy if we can achieve it, essentially.
Yeah. That's our step to becoming, that's the next step in human evolution, really, is being able to harness the energy of the stars. Yeah. And we're nowhere near there yet. But one of the things that's kind of kept us back is that, fission reactors and fission bombs are basically the same thing. And nobody wants a nuclear bomb going off in their backyard.
Yeah.
So why would you let anybody research, fission technology or fusion technology?
Sure.
Sorry. Even fission reactors.
Well, they're doing it, and they're doing it all over the place. They are trying.
They are. And I just actually, it kind of segues into something else that we've invested in Future Giants. But I just read an article that China has become the third country to discover an element on the moon.
I saw that as well. Yeah.
And also brought back some helium that they think would be the perfect fuel for fusion reactors.
Gotcha.
And that I thought was really interesting because in Future Giants we've been investing in helium also. And we've been investing in helium because I had no idea that helium was used for so many more things than blowing up party balloons and making your voice sound silly.
Yep. We did a whole episode on that.
Yeah. So I'm sure everybody that's listened and watched, is familiar with that. But I mean, MRI machines can't work without it. You can't manufacture semiconductors without it. I mean, basically, any clean room that you need, you need helium to keep that room clean.
It is pretty crazy the intricacies of the the global connected economy.
Oh yeah,
and
it really
and I
is.
feel like I used to not really pay attention to macro stuff until more recently when it has become so apparently important.
Right.
And
right.
it is pretty wild how how intricate everything is, and you could just have a little break somewhere and it kind of messes with everything.
Yeah, and this year, I've seen headlines that Harvard's physics lab had to shut down because they ran out of helium.
Yeah, there are PhD students who essentially had to switch their theses because they couldn't get the helium that was required to perform the experiments of that they needed to.
Uh-huh.
So.
I feel like there was a Big Bang Theory episode about that.
Yeah.
Where they needed helium and they were buying it off of some guy in a garage, and then they got freaked out, so they sold it back to him, and then they decided that they really wanted the helium, so they went and bought it back from him again.
That's pretty funny.
But yeah, they were gonna have to basically let somebody else get a Nobel Prize if they couldn't get the helium on that show.
Yep.
But that's literally what it's coming down to. These PhD students had to switch their thesis or not get their PhDs. That was their choice.
Yep. All right. So you mentioned coverage of all these different these three companies that we've kind of mentioned, or three investment opportunities in Future Giants. What does that coverage look like? Is that are you just kind of updating people on a weekly basis? Are there official reading? Is there reading material?
There's reports on all of the companies.
Okay.
All three of the companies that I talked about today. There's reports out there on them. We've got the future Emperor of Energy Storage, the next Nestle, and
the Helium pick?
The Helium pick, which I feel like the title of that report for anybody who gets on the website and is looking for it is,
whatever, doesn't matter.
It's going to say
Helium. You got to report on it.
And there's a report on it. But I think it's a Silicon Valley's salvation or something like that.
Gotcha.
Because Silicon Valley really can't exist without, you can't make silicon semiconductors
you need
without
the chips.
helium.
I mean, you need helium for the chips,
Exactly. And so all of those, I have detailed reports out on those. And then, I'm giving out weekly updates on our portfolio, on the stocks in the portfolio. So every stock doesn't get coverage every week. I just don't. Nobody has time to do that. But all the important things that have happened, get coverage. And then if nothing's really happened, and it's just business as usual, then we cover that stock when something is going on or when we think it's a good time to be putting in more money. So that's another thing is we're also giving clear buy and sell signals.
Gotcha.
We have sell targets on all of these stocks, and once they hit those targets, even if we think maybe they could go up a little higher,
you're committed to it. Yeah,
we're committed to those sell targets. We think that
what
that is
kind
a
of
good
what are
price
your
for the companies.
The sell targets that you're looking for? What kind of gains? Are you pretty much looking at a?
Most of them are around. They're going to be between 500 to 1,000%.
Yeah.
These are small companies that really have big potential. And honestly, all of them have probably more potential than 1,000%. But I mean, is anybody going to complain if I cut them off at 1,000%?
You'll take it. You'll take it.
I'll take that. I'll take a 10x all day, every day, and you can keep the extra 100% that comes after that or something.
All right. Anything else you want to plug before we wrap it up?
I've got all of my other newsletters. Alpha Profit Machine has been just doing really great. I think everybody should check that one out. It's an algorithmic trading service, and it's the kind of algorithms that we used when I was at Morgan Stanley on Wall Street. That it's designed by people that designed algorithms for hedge funds, for these high frequency traders.
Yep.
And it just outperforms the market. So far this year, we're about flat. So while the stock markets are down, what the Nasdaq is down like 25%, the S&P is down like 18, and I think the Dow's down 16. We're flat. We haven't made money, but we haven't lost money.
Yeah.
So that means we still got all of that money that we started the year with
Sure.
to invest in those stocks that are all beaten down
And are way
this
cheaper
year.
now. That makes sense.
Yep. So it's been really good. And in bull markets, the machines outperformed the market by a good like 3 to 4 to 1. So we're really excited for when the market turns around, but honestly, I'm just happy to still be basically where I was when I started the year, and I think that really shows the power of that algorithm, and of sort of taking the emotion out of it, and letting it be just
Yeah, well,
reason.
you and I got into that on one of the previous podcasts, so maybe I'll put a link in there. And,
definitely, yeah. People should check that out because it is tough. It's tough, even for me. I've been in finance my whole life. It's tough to set emotions aside. Like I said, I'm looking at buying a new house, and that 20% down payment, man, that is a big check to write. And like that's a very emotional check to write, even though I know it's a really good idea for me to do it. So like my brain is telling me one thing, and my heart's telling me something else, and then my gut is like, just don't pay any attention to them and do it.
Well, I wish you luck with that purchase and all
Appreciate
the investment speculations that you're looking at right now. I hope they crush it, and hope to see you on here next time.
I'm confident in them. You can't win them all, but I'm confident that we're going to win enough that we're going to be looking really good.
All right, well, good luck.
All right, thanks for having me.
All right, no problem. Everyone else, like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.